Welcome to episode 71 of the Eat for Endurance podcast. My name is Claire Schornstein, and I'm a board-certified sports dietitian and runner based in Santa Cruz, California. I provide virtual nutrition services to athletes of all abilities, and I host this podcast to demonstrate that there is no one-size-fits-all nutrition approach towards optimal health and performance. Today's athlete nutrition profile features pro runner Sage Canaday. Sage has been running for over 20 years and is known for his any surface, any distance motto, as well as his creative videos on social media. He started out on the roads and is a two-time U.S. Olympic trials qualifier in the marathon. He also placed top 20 overall at both the Boston and Chicago marathons. In 2012, he made his way into mountain ultra trail running with major wins and podiums at many races in the years that followed. Sage is a vegan, and we of course dive into what led him to remove all animal products from his diet and how he has fueled his long career as a distance runner on a plant-based style of eating. We also touch upon the current state of his health. You may have seen that he had some pretty serious health complications a couple years ago. Just an FYI, we recorded this interview back in early June. So without further ado, please enjoy my interview with pro runner Sage Canaday. All right, Sage Canaday, how are you doing today? Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Yeah, honored to be on here. Doing great.
So I saw you were in Bryce Canyon recently, or at least you were filming there. That looked pretty epic. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, there's there's so many national parks here in the U.S., and I had never been to Bryce, actually. It was our first time. We'd been to Zion, which is kind of nearby, and Canyonlands, Moab area, Arches, I guess, is the national park there. So, from where I live in Colorado now, you could actually drive there in one day. It's like a 9-hour drive.
Oh, wow.
So kind of a big road trip, but we were originally going to camp, and then we ended up staying in a hotel, and then we had to cut our trip a little short, actually. But we got to enjoy most of the trails there because as a trail runner, you could cover a lot of ground pretty quickly. And I don't know, you've probably been to Bryce. It's not
I haven't
as
actually.
big
It's
as
it's on my list.
Highly recommend, especially I think it was there are a couple different loops you could do. Like we didn't cover all the trails, but there's some really cool, unique like rock formations that you don't see like anywhere else in the world. Maybe other parts of Utah, but it was different, a lot different from Zion, even though it's right next to Zion. So it was really cool.
Yeah.
Highly recommend.
That's so awesome. Yeah, Zion, Bryce, Canyon, even the Grand Canyon, rim to rim, all of that is like on my list. And I still have young children, and childcare is always an issue. So as soon as they're a little bit older, definitely putting that on the vacation list. Because my husband and I usually do like adventure days together, just like you and your wife do. Well, awesome. I like to start these interviews by digging into nutrition roots. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about growing up in Oregon. I know you grew up in rural Oregon. In terms of your memories surrounding meal times, and just food generally.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit biased because I was born and raised vegetarian, ovo-lacto vegetarian. My parents actually went to school out here in Colorado. They met at CU Boulder, like in the 70s, and became vegetarian back then in the 1970s. So then when my older brother and I came along in the late 80s, we were born and raised vegetarian. They'd already been vegetarian. I guess a lot of my friends, I went to a pretty, I'd say average Oregon school system. I was just in public schools, and a lot of local friends ate probably pretty standard American diets, I'd say. So there was always this peer pressure to try to fit in and eat. I tried, my parents would let us try meat. They wouldn't go out of their way to buy it, but they said, if you want to eat meat or try seafood or something exotic, you could do it, and we would. And I usually wouldn't like it. The soccer team would all get pepperoni pizza because pepperoni was a favorite flavor, and I'd be picking at it and I'd eat it and I'd be like, it kind of tastes weird. Like a foreign cuisine was the way I always reacted to eating meat. But even as a child growing back then, I thought being 100% vegan or plant-based was crazy. Even as a vegetarian growing up. And I was ovo-lacto vegetarian until about 10 years ago. Now I'm basically 100% vegan, plant-based. So yeah, I'd say my parents were very influential. but I also didn't feel like I was really missing out on things, but maybe that's because that's how I was born and raised.
Yeah. And I was going to ask this later, but I may as well ask it now. What led you to kind of take that extra step to remove pretty much all animal foods? Because you said you're almost 100% vegan. So I don't know what you include in there, if it's honey or something. But yeah, what kind of led you to go all the way?
Yeah, it's mainly honey. Sometimes when I
Hmm.
travel, we'll have a baked good that might have eggs or butter in it, I guess.
Hmm.
I'm not lactose intolerant really too much, but I generally avoid dairy for the most part. And that was probably the hardest thing to give up, like cheese
Hmm.
from real dairy. But no, my partner, Sandy Nightpaver, who she was the first one to go vegan. When we met and first started dating, she was already vegetarian too,
Hmm.
but she didn't grow up being vegetarian like I did.
Yeah.
But then we looked into it. There were different things, I guess, mainly with like just looking at some of the environmental issues, I guess, around carbon footprint impact. And I'm not saying I'm an environmentalist at all. I fly on airplanes all the time and travel a
Sure.
lot and do all sorts of things. But, there seemed to be a lot of benefits from eating more plant-based calories in general, less processed food.
Hmm.
So it's more of a whole foods, plant-based diet. Um, and it just seemed like if you could get all the nutrients you needed to run at a high level, it was an easy transition coming from being a vegetarian. The hardest
Sure.
thing really is to probably give up cheese. But there's also more products now. So in the last 10 years, you could see it at grocery stores now. It's not a weird thing to
Hmm.
get like a veggie burger or a Beyond Burger, Impossible Burger,
Yep.
or to even go to like a mainstream restaurant or fast food restaurant, and they have options now. And it's not crazy to say that you're lactose intolerant or something or gluten free.
Sure.
So that definitely helped. But yeah, it kind of coincided with our move to Colorado too. Colorado is a great state to be in, especially if you're like in Boulder.
Hmm.
It's kind of most of the athletes in Boulder are on some sort of diet.
Yeah.
We don't see it as a diet; we see it as a lifestyle. But yeah,
Sure. Sure.
it's that probably all those influences.
Got it. Okay. And we're going to circle back to that later on when I kind of talk about the connection between, what you're eating and performance and how it all ties in, what a typical day looks like. But I just wanted to I was curious what that extra step. So thanks for, visiting that now. Um, I'm curious, you mentioned peer pressure in terms of foods and all of that. And, um, you know, was anyone else kind of eating a little bit more plant-based? Did it make you self-conscious? Was it something you didn't really like? Because you were trying things, you said, but when you discovered that you didn't like anything, was that something that made you feel comfortable with the way that you ate? Or was it something that was a little bit of a problem for you in
As
terms
a
of how you
child
related to
growing
your
up,
peers? Yeah, yeah.
yeah, no, it kind of just reaffirmed what my parents, I think, had already been doing. Because
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well, I'll try different stuff. But it's, every time I tried meat, especially like, I don't know, just like red meat or chicken, the first thing I noticed was always the texture.
Mm-hmm.
It was like eating a totally different foreign cuisine. And like I
Yeah.
lived in Japan for a year. I went to school in Japan and lived there for a year when I was 8 years old, and we had like all sorts of seafood stuff, sometimes accidentally, and it was usually not a pleasant surprise. It was usually kind of, I could tell right away, or like I could tell, you go to a restaurant and if someone messes up your order and they put beef instead of beans or something, as a vegetarian, like you notice it right away, like
Sure.
instantly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I felt pretty comfortable, I guess, in my own skin growing up. Like there was a little peer pressure maybe to try or be like, um, to maybe try the hot dogs or pepperoni pizza that they would have at parties, or you didn't want to be like the only kid that was vegetarian. But at the same time, even being vegetarian back then, well, in rural Oregon, wasn't, I guess I didn't view it as being too extreme. So it was easy to kind of just
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
justify it. And then as I got older, I kind of just ironed in even more. And there seemed to be a lot of health benefits, environmental benefits, and I like
Yeah.
animals, and so it
Sure.
kind of just fit my identity well as I got older.
Yeah. It's funny because I have this like vivid memory as a, in elementary school sitting with like, my lunch that my mom packed me and it was like a roast beef sandwich. I grew up where I also live now, Santa Cruz, California, which is like super crunchy. And I just remember a bunch of my friends having like tofu and like it was like the opposite experience. It was like all these vegetarian things and I had a roast beef sandwich and I was just like, I don't feel like I should be eating this. So it's
Yeah.
really all about, the environment you're in. Okay, so, you found running quite young, and it sounds like, you were pretty competitive right from the start. Do you remember thinking about nutrition any differently as you started, competing as a runner? And, whether it was simply, I have to eat more, or whether using certain products or anything like that?
Oh yeah, definitely. And maybe not so much when I first started running, because like you said, I started
Hmm.
when I was like 12. So
Yeah.
as a kid, I wasn't too on top of things. I just eat whenever I was hungry, and I remember eating like those old school power bars before
Yeah.
track practice and stuff, and
Yeah.
a lot of peanut butter jelly sandwiches. And yeah, I mean, my parents were pretty on top of it because they were like, "Oh, we'll make sure you get some protein with each meal, right?" That's the first thing people are like, "Oh, where do you get your protein from?" And
Hmm.
it was pretty easy growing up, especially eating dairy. But we'd have like all sorts of different cuisines. My parents are good cooks, so that helps. So they made sure I was
Hmm.
balanced, and I didn't think of it too much until maybe high school, when I got low on iron. And we had a really
Okay.
good family doctor, and he'd check panels and stuff. But the thing with something like iron, so that I had to take an iron supplement, and people be like, "Oh, you must have a deficient diet then." But the thing with like things like iron or even B12 sometimes is vitamin D, is that it seems to be more of an all athlete problem. Like there's definitely variation with diets and stuff, but like so many runners I ran with in high school, college, and at the pro level, guys that ate red meat 3 times a week would still get low on iron. But
Hmm.
it that kind of alerted me to thinking like, okay, I can't just eat peanut butter jelly sandwiches all the time. Can't just eat pasta with plain tomato sauce. So even like through college, I almost majored in nutrition in college. Actually,
Oh, cool.
my sophomore year, I was dabbling with all these different majors. So I took a lot of special nutrition classes in college. I did take some biochem and stuff like that. So it was always kind of a
Hmm.
hobby passion of mine and interest of mine. And as an athlete, I ran Division 1, NCAA Division 1 track and cross country in college. We had like a nutrition coach, and she's like, "You need to add cottage cheese to your pasta," and I thought that was gross, and so then I didn't do it. And then I was like, I'm not going to be too worried about protein. I'm running 150 miles a week. I'm running well, like strong. Like the protein was never a concern. It was more, I need to have a balanced diet so I, keep my iron levels high, stuff like that.
Yeah. And yeah, and I definitely agree, certain micronutrients like iron, and B12, yeah, vitamin D, getting enough of many things is definitely a concern for all athletes, especially endurance athletes. Um, but yes, when you are on a more restricted diet, we are particularly concerned about certain things. But yes, we all have to pay attention to those things as endurance athletes. So in college, I mean, you kind of already, I was going to ask you about kind of experimenting with different foods once you were out of your parents' house, but it sounded like you already did that when you were younger. So when you were kind of on this competitive college team, again, did you feel that kind of pressure to do different things, or did you yourself decide you wanted to try again, or you were really, again, happy with where you're at with your diet and not wanting or needing to make changes?
In college, it depended on how my running was going usually, but
Yeah.
for the most part, by the time I got to college, my identity with being a vegetarian was pretty much solidified. And
Sure.
there were probably other vegetarians on my team now that I think about it. And, college, the biggest thing was I had this all you could eat meal plan, and I pigged out on like pizza and pancakes and waffles my freshman year, and probably ate pretty unbalanced, and my iron got really, that was the lowest my iron ever got, actually, was that year. And my running
Mm.
suffered a bit. I gained like probably the freshman 15, right off the bat. So that was the only thing that changed really in college. And then after that, I was cooking at home more. By the time I was a senior, I was cooking a lot of my own meals, and a lot of days it was plain pasta with marinara sauce and a packaged salad and garlic bread. So it was
Mm-hmm.
always really carb heavy, and I ran well on that. There was no peer pressure really to try meat anymore. I didn't until after I joined a post collegiate team. I did
Yeah.
have 1 month where I ran professional marathons right after college, and I had a really bad season. And I was like, maybe I could boost my iron and eat more protein if I had like red meat twice a week. So I did try it, and I really disliked it. I had trouble. I probably overcooked my meat because I didn't know what I was doing, but I'd have
Yeah.
like bison burgers and like steak,
Uh-huh.
and it
Uh-huh.
basically didn't change my iron. I mean, it was a weak experiment, n equals one, short
Yeah.
term, but it made me feel more bad. Usually, I didn't like get sick or anything. I actually didn't
Yeah.
feel that different. But I kind of was like, never again. um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so, and I also didn't enjoy eating the flavor really either. So there's that.
Yeah. So you had these kind of ongoing iron issues. What kinds of things were you doing, whether it was through supplementation, certain foods, dietary changes, whatever, were you doing to kind of climb out of that hole and help your iron status recover to a good place?
Well, when I was running like 140 miles a week, pretty hard, I think, you lose a lot through sweat. You lose a lot through just the impact force, the foot strike. So, it's a very stressful thing. I was taking a pretty high dose at some point I took different forms of iron, and you have to be
Mm-hmm.
careful with that one because it's pretty toxic if you don't want to take too much of anything.
No, of course
But
not.
I was under doctor supervision, and
Yep.
I think I seemed to just age out of it. Like I think as I got older and I ate more citrus fruits and more vegetables and actual salads, it seemed like I had to take less and less of my iron supplement. So I think, yeah, just experimenting with different forms, seeing what works. But I closely monitor it. Like throughout my whole career, I've had blood tests like
Mm-hmm.
every 3 or 4 months, basically, and you're always getting, uh, not just a ferritin test, but a total iron stores, percent
Yep.
saturation, making
Mm-hmm.
sure like everything's optimized. But I found, yeah, the more I had a well-rounded diet and thought about eating healthy, it seemed like the less of a supplement of iron that I had to take. So it kind of just worked its
Yeah.
way out. Like I barely take any now, and my
That's
iron's
great.
like stabilized. Yeah, I don't know, getting
Where
older or
does
something.
Yeah. Do you have kind of like a range that you target for yourself where you feel good in terms of where your ferritin is at? Like if you're doing it every 3 to 4 months, you're like, oh, I really want my ferritin to be within this particular range for me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, ferritin's not the end all, but I did
Sure.
find that when it dropped below 40,
Yeah.
I don't know the exact units, probably nanograms. Um,
Yeah.
Whatever the ferritin measure is, when it dropped below 40, I started feeling bad and running poorly. I probably wouldn't notice it if I wasn't running hard workouts,
Yeah.
but because you're a runner, an athlete, you're pushing yourself, like I'd be like, oh, like maybe my iron's low, and then sure enough, it would be like in
Yeah.
the 30s. Whereas, like I know a standard doctor or a lot of medical professionals in the U.S. would be like, oh no, you're fine. Like the normal range could go down to like 20, but it seemed to be like a very individual thing. And then it
Yes.
also seems to be tied together with other things like your B12 and your folate status and maybe even like zinc and things like that. So it's very complex, but yeah, for me personally, it was like 40. For other people, I ran with guys that would be like 15 and then they'd feel bad and they'd be like, wow, it's really
Yeah.
low. I've seen, yeah, all sorts of iron numbers, but a lot of times now it's closer to 100.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. That's great level. Yeah, no, we've talked about iron status more broadly and ferritin a lot on this show with both other sports dietitians and other athletes. And yeah, I certainly try to recommend for my athletes, that they're at least 40 and above, typically for endurance athletes, at least. And a lot of times, as you just said, it's where do you feel good at? And the quote unquote normal amounts that doctors are saying, like that's not applicable for endurance athletes. So I'm glad to hear that it's in a good place now. Yeah, let's touch on your time with the Hansen brothers. So, you were a pro runner, a marathon runner for a bit on the roads with them, training hard. And it sounds like, in terms of nutrition, the everyday nutrition, that was kind of the same. You're eating vegetarian, you were toying around with meat that didn't work out. Maybe you can kind of tell me a little bit about, in terms of connecting the nutrition to performance piece and like what types of products you're using or any like key learning moments, perhaps, because you were moving into this, professional athlete world, or anything that stands out for you on the nutrition front.
Yeah. So right after I graduated college, I was lucky. I had a contract with this Brooks sponsored team called Hanson's Brooks. The two coaches are the Hanson brothers, and they live in Michigan, Detroit metro area. They're the coaches, but they also put you up in free like track houses, so you don't have to pay rent. And then a lot of us would work at shoe stores too. So we were still working like 30 hours a week part time, but we were also like full time runners because everything else was supported. We had some extra money for health insurance. We had some chiropractic services. We had a gym membership, and then we had free training, a bunch of shoes and gear from Brooks. And the whole goal was to try to get guys or women and guys on the Olympic teams, the Olympic marathon teams, especially. Some people focus on 10K half marathon, but a lot of people like me it was all about the marathon, and they actually did succeed. Right before I joined, their first athlete, Brian Sell, made the Beijing Olympics in 2008. And then in 2012, when I was still on the team running the Olympic trials, Desi Linden made her first Olympic team. And she also got second at Boston one of those years. I was on the team with her, and then eventually she won Boston. But yeah, I was teammates with Desi Linden and athletes like that. A lot of guys running like 2:14 or faster for the marathon. I only ran 2:16, but yeah, seeing the habits of other people, I can't say it was actually surprising that a lot of my teammates we would all eat a lot of junk food. We were running like 120 to 140 miles a week, but they're like Brian Sell, he made the Olympics. Like he loved to eat McDonald's all the time, and then a lot of us, we'd always go out and have like this really greasy pizza a lot of times. So I can't say things were really optimized in the nutrition department. It was probably worse than college in a lot of ways.
Interesting.
But I figured, a lot of us were still in our 20s or early 30s at the oldest. So like it almost taught me that you could like get away with some stuff when your metabolism's revved up and you're younger. But then like, now that I'm in my mid to late 30s, I realize that I can't get away with the same stuff that I got away with maybe in my 20s. So it's kind of the benefit of hindsight, I guess, on that. But yeah, there's a surprisingly high amount of junk food in that program. But like I said, with the iron tests, we were still getting a lot of blood tests, and a lot of my teammates who ate red meat 3 times a week would be like lower on iron than I was. And there were a lot of injuries and overtraining too, but it's hard to separate the athletic performance with nutrition because there's also the variable of work-life stress and
of course
the running training that you're doing. But yeah, it was surprisingly unstructured, I'd say.
And what about the performance nutrition piece? Like what kinds of things were you using during training, during races and all of that? Do you remember?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have now I have like nutrition sponsors, but back then we really didn't. I guess after some hard workouts and long runs, like I'd try to always get in a recovery shake. So like, especially if we were taking it straight to work in our car. So I'd like premix. I'm trying to think of the product I was taking. Some sort of protein powder that I would take sometimes, but usually I just like make myself a peanut butter jelly sandwich.
Yeah.
But we make sure like we ate enough, and we make sure we'd eat within 20-30 minutes after a hard workout. Like I always had food on hand to snack on because we were running twice a day. We were running 120 to 140 miles a week. We were probably averaging close to 6-minute miles on our easy days. So it was really intense. But I'd get takeout pizza multiple times a week, probably. I'd make giant stacks of pancakes, a lot of coffee. Yeah, one of the running stores was next to McDonald's, and I used to go over there and get like the little apple pies. You could get two for $1. I think it was
Sure.
like you could get one for 98 cents, and then if you spent $1, you got two, which are like horrible for you. But I was always, it was like all sugar.
I'm sure you were burning that very quickly though with what you were
Yeah.
doing.
I have a good story.
Yeah.
When we started
Okay.
racing the marathon, I had heard that my teammate Brian Sell, we'd have like special elite fluid bottles. So like if you go to the Boston Marathon and you're one of the top 20 guys, you could get a special bottle every 5K. And the stuff, what we would put in our bottles, you could pick whatever drink you wanted, but the go-to was to have like Gatorade, like I'd do like orange Gatorade, and then I'd put it would be 3 parts Gatorade, 1 part Red Bull, and then you'd water it down 50%, and it was like a 7 to 8% carbohydrate solution. So I'd be chugging this Red Bull Gatorade watered down mix as my drink mix, and then I think we back then we just started taking maybe a couple gels during the marathon, but my first couple of marathons I didn't take any gels. I was just drinking that kind of drink mix, yeah. But a lot of the guys in the team would. Yeah. Yeah,
it's like back in the day when these all like now you can get like 1,000 different types of drink mixes. It's crazy. It's crazy actually. Like it's pretty relatively recent, just how many products are out there now. But it's always funny hearing people's stories, especially when I'm interviewing some of like the older runners. Like I've had Marshall Ulrich and Lisa Smith Batchen, and that they're like, well, we basically didn't do much of anything. It's like, they didn't have all these products out there. So you got into, mountain ultra trail running in 2012. And I'm really curious, again, from a nutrition perspective in particular, what it was like moving from, road marathons to trail and ultras. Obviously completely different type of situation, but from, and just in terms of nutrition strategies and all of that, but especially in those early years. So I know you've had a very long career and we'll talk about how things changed over the last decade or so, but, right when you were starting, maybe in the first year or two, what was that like kind of getting into that whole scene?
Yeah. So I started mountain ultra trail running, like you said, in 2012. It was actually, I ran the Olympic Trials Marathon with Hanson's Brooks. It was in like February, which I forgot if it was January or February. It was in the middle of the winter of 2012 in Houston. And I didn't run my PR there. I ran like a 2:18 and I was kind of on my way out. I kind of wanted to move on. I'd been there for 3 years. I was kind of homesick. I didn't have anywhere to go, but I knew I wanted to keep running. And I thought I was looking at like these running magazines and there was like an article on like Killian Jornet or someone. I was like, wow, that's really cool. Like he's running on these beautiful hiking trails in the mountains. I want to do that. So then it kind of coincided with me leaving Hanson's Brooks, leaving Michigan, and basically moving. I went home briefly to Oregon because I didn't have anywhere to go. But then I was like, I'm moving to Colorado that summer. So 2012, I moved to Boulder, Denver, then Boulder, and was just living at altitude for the first time, training at altitude. The altitude, I feel like, affected me. I feel like I actually like lost some weight as soon as I moved to altitude. Like I was dehydrated. Maybe I was just dehydrated. I was dehydrated all the time. You wake up in the middle of the night with a dry mouth. I was like, wow, you have to stay hydrated at altitude. So that was one thing that changed. And then I had to buy some sunglasses because it's so bright outside. You have to protect your eyes. And then, going up to the mountains, I just started doing more hill training, more vertical, getting up to like doing 14ers even in Colorado. So 14,000 foot peaks. And I just seemed to be like, it like revved up my metabolism. But my first race was actually, I wanted to make the U.S. mountain running team. And it was actually only like a 12K race. It was the Mount Washington road race in New Hampshire, was the men's championship that year. And I had been practicing on a treadmill a bit, doing some high intensity stuff. I was in good half marathon shape, but I went out there and I discovered that I had a knack for climbing, and I ended up winning the first U.S. mountain championship there. And then I was on the world team, and then right after that, I was like, I'm going to try an ultra marathon too, and I did a 50-mile race and won that. So it was a good move, but Yeah, I learned a lot, especially when I did that 50-mile race, that if I didn't eat enough gels or drink enough Coke during the race, I would not feel good.
So were you still doing kind of mostly gels and liquids at that point? Were you ever, like, at what point were you moving to kind of foods and just different types of products?
Like during a race,
Or do you not do any foods during a race?
I have in like 100-mile races,
Okay.
which have not gone well. I've only started and finished a few 100-mile races in my whole career still.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
And I've resorted to eating solid food in those. In some of my better, like up to 100K, I've run a lot of 50-mile races, especially here
Okay.
in the US. We have a lot of 50
Yeah.
milers.
Hmm.
I pretty much always will do it all on gels and drink calories. Sometimes I'll grab like handfuls of potato chips, um,
Hmm.
but it depends. It depends on the weather too, because like I
Sure.
think I probably sweat pretty salty, even compared to most people. So like you're always balancing that savory versus sweet, and that's probably something that kind of changes. I was like, oh, you can't just take these really sweet gels all the time and drink Coca-Cola. Like at some point, I was like, you need to have like potato chips or something with salt in it, and just to change it up because I also like had some GI distress where I probably had too much sugar too fast.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe that this is a good segue into, as I said, like you've run so many races over the course of your career, and you have your whole any surface any distance thing, so you've had a lot of different types of races in there. It's not just obviously ultras and all of that. So I'd love for you to kind of reflect a little bit more on looking back at, like, say, the last 10 years, or maybe it's 5 to 8 years or whatever it is, on maybe some other things that have evolved in your nutrition. I mean, I know you started using Spring Energy at one point. That's one of your sponsors. I love Spring. It's so great. And you mentioned kind of this challenge with the how much sugar you're taking in, so maybe how many calories, and then the longer distance, the real food. So yeah, I'm kind of curious. Maybe you can give some more examples. Maybe you can talk about how your nutrition strategies shift, like these days when you're racing roads versus trails, or kind of anything else, again, that stands out to you.
Yeah, like you said, motto, any service, any distance. So I kept
Yeah.
trying to run in the Olympic trials on road marathons, but it would be like 2015, for example. I was trying to do. I'd gotten into my first 100 at UTMB. I actually had been number one at UTMB that summer. But at the same time, I was like, I want to qualify for the Olympic trials on the road in the marathon. So I was running like the U.S. championships in LA, Boston Marathon. Then I wanted to run the Comrades Ultra Marathon in South Africa in June. And then go straight from that into like Speed Goat 50K, like a mountain race, to UTMB, all in a matter of like 5 months. And I ran probably my best marathon was Boston 2015 because I got 16th place. But I ended up missing the trials time by 12 seconds because you had to run under 219, and I ran 219.12.
Mm.
But thinking of my fueling strategy going into that race for like a high performance road marathon, I had my special bottles that I filled with an electrolyte drink, and then I knew I could grab a couple. There's a couple aid stations at road marathons like Boston where they have like some sponsor drink and maybe a gel. But then I carried 4 Spring Energy Canterbury with me. All right, I taped some to my bottles because I had special bottles, and I had a couple in
Hmm.
my pockets. So I was basically taking Spring Energy Canterbury, 100 calories every 5K, or no, not every 5K, every 5 miles. And then I was also drinking some calories in. They let you have bottles every 5K actually. So
Hmm.
it's always a combination of usually fluid calories and the gels, but that's just for like a 2 hour marathon race. We
Yeah.
extended up to like, the Speed Goat 50K, which I've done a lot out in the mountains of Utah, outside of Salt Lake City. You're at high altitude, you're burning it hot because you're climbing straight up this mountain trail at 11,000 feet. So there'd be points in that race where I'd take like 2 gels at the same time, just like 200 calories straight down, which is
Yeah,
a little risky because you could overdo it.
sure.
But I start learning after, like 3 hours, 4 hours. I tell my parents, okay, get potato chips ready because maybe I'll want to grab that. And the great thing with ultras is like you could stop and take your time at the aid stations a little bit. It's not like a road marathon where I try to hit my bottle at low 5 minute mile pace and not slow
Yeah,
down. The ultras, I'll stop. Maybe, if you're
sure.
really struggling, you might have to sit down, but my parents will hand me things. I'll try potato chips. And so that kind of changed the whole sweet salty mix. And then with Spring Energy being more whole foods based, you kind of got away from the really slimy, overly sweet gels. Those could still save you in a pinch, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I found like, just having like the canterbury flavor I helped develop with Spring Energy. It's like a
Hmm.
strawberry flavor, so it's refreshing. But I'll change up fruit with other flavors too.
Hmm. And I'm actually curious, when you developed that with them, did you kind of come up with the concept of like, what flavor profile it's going to have and roughly how many calories and that whole thing, or how much involvement did you have in the creation of that one?
Sorry, clear my throat here. I just did a mountain run.
No
A
worries.
decent amount, I'd say. It was they kind of had an idea for a fruit flavor, and they're like, "Well, what kind of fruit do you like?" And I think they'd already had um the Hillade and the beet one, like the pink one. I think what it's called.
Oh, the
Power
plum
Rush.
one.
Oh, it was
Yeah, the
plum,
plum. Yeah,
Power
yeah,
Rush. Yeah.
plum. Yeah, yeah,
So they had the mango Hillade, and then they had plum, and so you had this like pink wrapper, the yellow wrapper, and then the Canterbury is going to be the red wrapper. But we went through maybe 3 or 4 recipes, and I'd just sample it without knowing the nutrition facts, and I'd be like,
yeah.
oh, make it a little sweeter, add more strawberry flavor. So they were quite flexible with it. I've seen the process out there in the Spring Energy kitchen, and working with the co-founders directly. I met them at the Western States training camp in
Mm-hmm.
2016. So it was a really fortunate position, and I was really lucky to be in it. Um, and yeah, we wanted it to be at least 100 calories. It's still like 100 calories exactly.
Yeah.
And then mostly carb based. I think originally he wanted a couple more grams of fat in it, but then I was like, I wanted to lower the the number of grams of fat in it, because it does have like little. Sometimes they'll add like coconut oil or coconut cream to some of their flavors, and
Yeah.
you could change the profile with the macros quite a bit there. But you're getting all the benefits of the vitamins and nutrients that you would get in things like whole fruits, and even some of them rice based too. You're getting a lot of the carbohydrates from that, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. My definitely my favorite is I have that one in my house all the time. The awesome sauce is definitely my favorite. I love that it's 45 grams of carbohydrate because I'm usually going for more carbs. And although, did they change the consistency recently? Do you know? It tastes thicker to me now for some reason. Maybe it's just me.
They
Do you
might have.
know?
I don't know
Mm.
much. What I do know between the Canterbury and Awesome Sauce is that the Awesome Sauce is actually slightly bigger, and that's part of the reason it
Ah,
has more
yeah.
calories in it. It's
Hmm. Hmm.
actually like 46 grams.
Okay.
Like the packaging labels are actually slightly bigger, and the Canterbury
Yeah.
is like 42 grams.
Okay.
Um, which yeah, I've talked to them about this. And then yeah, they'll add like a little bit more maple syrup to make it a little sweeter, and add more carbs to it in a more condensed form. But
Hmm.
part of it with Awesome Sauce, so you get the strong apple flavor, so
Yes.
you're getting like a different fruit flavor. So yeah, I mix those up a lot. Good.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. The very like or the more high fat ones I definitely don't use as much. I played around with them. First, for me personally, that they felt a little too heavy, but I know some people are big fans of like the coffee and was it the speed nut is the other one. Do you ever use those products as well?
I don't use those as much during races.
Yeah,
I've tried them throughout the years, but yeah, it's for me. I found if I have too much fat during a race, it's usually not good.
yeah.
But that maybe it's a reflection of my everyday diet too. I'm not on like a high fat, low
Yeah,
carb
sure.
diet. So
Me neither.
it's kind of like the opposite.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I do like I mainly stick with the fruity flavors are my favorites. So Awesome Sauce, Canterbury, and then I'll mix in the Hill Aid and Power Rush. But now I
got it.
actually use a lot more of their drink mixes. So the other
Oh,
thing
okay.
I've probably learned over the years is that I'm better off getting in more liquid calories. So they have this like
Mm.
they actually powder fruit. They could powder basically anything. And I don't know if you've tried the Spring Energy drink
I
mixes.
have actually. I may have tried. Is it a pineapple one or
There's a
something? I mean,
pina
I tried.
colada one.
Oh, that's the one I tried once ages ago. But yeah, I haven't tried their
Oh,
other
okay.
stuff yet.
Yeah, and then there's three flavors now. There's a passion fruit date, or they call it
Mm.
passion fruit yam, but I thought
Okay.
passion fruit date was maybe a better name. And you could taste like the passion fruit in it, and it's like this bright orange, natural colored drink mix.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a new one. I actually don't know what the official name is. He just came out with it this year. It's like grapefruit. It's kind of like sour, but it's also kind of tangy, and it's a grapefruit based flavor. But with these packets, you get pulling out. You get like it's powdered, so it's really light and easy to carry in
Mm.
this little
Yeah.
tube. And then you could just dump it right in your fluid bottle, like while you're running, and you kind of have to mix it up a little, but it usually shakes around
Yeah.
in your vest anyway. And
Yeah.
it'll
Yeah. Yeah.
be 220 to 240 calories per serving, mostly
Okay.
carb based. The pina colada had maybe a couple grams of fat in it, but a
Mm.
lot of them are just mainly carb based. And then they have a decent amount of sodium and potassium, so you're getting the electrolytes too. But they also have a drink called the Electro Ride, which was like lower calorie count and more just the sodium and
The
potassium.
sodium.
But I found like that combination allows me to get in over 300 calories an hour during an ultra, mostly carb based. And my big thing is drinking enough fluid because I get dehydrated easily. So if it's really hot, it might be like a liter an hour type of scenario. But that, as you
Mm-hmm.
know, that carbohydrate mix to the electrolyte mix, that balance is pretty critical with the amount of
Yeah.
fluid you're drinking because it affects the concentration.
Yeah. Why do you think you're getting dehydrated so easily? Are you a heavy sweater or I don't know what's going on there, do you think?
I've never actually been tested, like with a sweat test to see like what my composition of sweat is like. But
Mm-hmm.
my theory is, and I didn't learn this till probably the last 5 or 6 years, is that I probably do sweat pretty salty, like more than most people. And then my other theory, and you're the nutrition expert here, but I think through my everyday diet, I don't eat a lot of highly processed foods or a lot of like super fast food or super salty food. My blood level baseline of sodium is actually on the lower side too. So this is another thing I monitor with the blood tests is they'll be like, your sodium is getting a little low, like it's like
Mm.
136 or 137, and so I'll just add more salt to my food, and I found that seems to make me always feel better. So it was not just drinking enough, but then also sweating salty, and then also there's been a lot of races where uh, I just take it out way too hard. So I'm going
Okay.
hard from the gun, and so I'm just full tilt. So yeah, I'm probably sweating hard, losing a lot of water vapor in my breath, and then really stressing my body. So like Western States 2016, for example, I just went out way too hard, and I paid the price.
Hey everyone, I just want to take a moment to share another podcast review with you today. Nicole J123 writes, "Love the practical information that this podcast provides. Interesting guests and great questions from Claire. Keep the episodes coming." Thank you so much, Nicole. Glad you're enjoying the show. So to keep these episodes coming, I do need your help. Please subscribe to the show and rate and review it if you haven't already. It takes 2 seconds. And then if you're able to support the show financially, which would be very much appreciated given that I do not currently have sponsors, I have a Patreon page where you can donate $1, 2, 3, whatever you feel like doing. And I also have an Amazon storefront that you can support. You can find those links in the show notes. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the episode. Have you ever done just like a simple fluid loss test, like with a scale at home, to kind of see how many pounds per hour you lose, that kind of thing?
I don't know. What are the formal metrics for that? Like, do you have to weigh yourself every hour,
Yeah,
or how does that work?
no, I would just like, this is what I do with clients all the time. I'll like, so there's like the sweat composition test, which is what measures your
Mhm.
sodium, right? And then there's the actual fluid loss test to find your sweat rate, how many ounces per hour you lose. And so then we kind of use those to get targets. But yeah, you just weigh yourself naked, ideally before and after, say like a 60-minute run. If you're drinking
Mm.
fluids, and you see how many ounces you took in. And then you can very simply kind of figure out, okay, well, if I lost 1 pound, that's roughly 16 ounces of fluid. And if I drink, just for simple math, I drink 16 ounces, probably, maybe you're not, well, maybe you are in an hour. I drink 16 ounces, so my sweat rate is 32 ounces an hour, that kind of thing.
Mm.
But yeah, that's usually what I'm doing with people, to kind of just get a ballpark of, hey, what are you losing? And all these, obviously your sweat rate will vary in the environment. It'll change based on fitness level and all of that. So kind of a simple test you can do throughout a training cycle, for instance, to kind of see where you're at. So,
Yeah.
but you can also just see, like, am I drenched or am I not? Right. So
Yeah.
there's that too. So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Just
no, that's a good
something to look
idea.
at.
Yeah, I've definitely done some long runs where I've probably wrecked myself and I'll be like thirsty and then I'll feel like pretty sick. And I'd say if I weighed myself, I mean, I could probably easily lose like 4 or 5 pounds after like a
Yeah.
3 hour long run. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm about 150 pounds, so that's a decent percentage of the body weight.
Yeah.
Would burning through some of your glycogen stores
Yep.
reduce it too a bit?
Yeah. So usually what I'm telling people is try to keep the run between, let's say, 45 minutes and like an hour and a half,
Yeah.
and 60 minutes is just the easy magic number, because easy math, we know you're probably not going to the bathroom to mess the numbers up, so yeah, I wouldn't have people do it on a long run, typically for the purposes of determining a sweat rate.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's something easy, you can do that. I do it myself, and I have people, again, it's just a kind of a ballpark, and just to test it periodically to see where you're at.
Yeah. That's a good
So
idea.
when you're kind of racing or doing like long training efforts, are you targeting like a certain number of calories or a certain amount of fluid, certain milligrams, sodium, all that? Like, do you have targets in mind, or how are you typically approaching that?
Generally, yeah. Like you said, it depends on the weather and the route and the intensity.
Mm-hmm.
With like athletes we've coached and like our own training, when I say we, I mean Sandy Nightpaver, my
Yep.
partner, and at Higher Running. We take in the weather into account and the intensity, and there'll be some long runs where you're like, I'm going to practice my race day nutrition plan, and it's going to be 300 to 350 calories an hour. It's going to be like 2 spring energy gels. Plus, I need to be drinking more than half a liter or 17 ounces of fluid at least. Maybe I go through a bottle and a half, and it's going to be filled with the spring energy mix. So yeah, it's very targeted. Like, you're trying to train your stomach and gut to take in that much, because that's quite a bit. Whereas if it's like a easy long run where it's all about just spending time on your feet and staying in zone 2, not spiking the heart rate too high or going crazy, I might actually take a lot less. Like, I'd call it more of like a fat burning long run, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you probably only need 1 gel an hour just so you don't, feel too weak. But I know I'm not burning it hot like I would in a race. So there's a very big difference, I think, with intensity. And then, I mean, you look at the altitude. How much climbing does this route have? Am I wasting more energy because it's technical? Stuff like
Sure.
that. So for the training runs and workouts, it's probably a little less planned, and I change it up. For the races, it's a lot more consistent, because I always have to take more during a race, and I'm also relying on aid stations and crew support a lot of times. So, but it's hard to gauge. It's hard to gauge in mountain ultras,
Mm-hmm.
because the weather could change at night in a long 100-mile race. You don't know maybe the lay of the land on some of these really long trail courses, or if you're racing in a different country, you don't know what's going to be at the aid station exactly. So a lot of times you get thrown. I've gotten thrown for a loop in mountain ultra running. Whereas a road marathon race, it's very controlled. It's more consistent. You don't have as many hills. Usually, you know what to expect. And for me, it's over in a couple hours, so it's
Yeah.
not drawn out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. When I say best and worst race nutrition experiences, what comes to mind for each?
I'd say my biggest nutritional meltdown was probably when I did Western States in 2016.
Hmm.
And part of it, like I said, is I just went out too fast. It was a pretty hot day. It's almost always hot at Western States.
Yeah.
I think it was slightly hotter than average maybe that year. And I was chasing Jim Walmsley, who was in the lead. And we were both under course record pace through the first half. So through the canyons coming into like Michigan Bluff. And I think I just, because you get distracted with that, you get in your own head, you forget to eat and drink. And then you're pushing a high heart rate, your blood flow is diverted from your GI tract, all these things. The biggest mistake I think though is my parents were meeting me at Dusty Corners at like mile 44, and they were going to give me a hydration pack with like all my fluid bottle, like a liter of fluid, and I had it all planned out that it was going to be electrolyte fluid. And for some reason, when I got there, I think it was just because it was so hot and I was running so hard, I was like, dump it out. I just want plain ice water. And because that's like what I was craving. And so I'm trying to chug just like plain water, and it just hit my stomach. And I didn't think about it till way after the race. But ever since that, I was like, I got super nauseous. I started throwing up all over. By the time I got to Forest Hill, I was in a lot of pain. And I was trying to eat, but I just couldn't keep anything down after that. So Western States became a puke fest after that. And when I look back on it, I couldn't get calories in. So I was running out of glycogen, but I also was massively dehydrated. Like, I don't think I went to the bathroom for like 12 hours. And when I finished Western States, I was wrecked. Like I was sick to my stomach the next morning at awards, like 15 hours later. So then I was like, wow, this is kind of dangerous. Like you could really get dehydrated and cause permanent damage or, worse. So I was like, you need to make sure you have more sodium and potassium probably in your drink mix, and don't just drink plain water. And ever since then, that's kind of helped. And I found it, not only does it help with like not making your legs feel like they're turning to cement, which is a common thing, is you get your blood's thickening, you're losing volume, but and muscle function, but also the nausea with the stomach distress, because people will be like, oh, I was having stomach issues. Well, that could happen from a lot of reasons, but being dehydrated throws off you could hear like the fluid sloshing around in my stomach because I wasn't absorbing it.
Yeah.
So that was a tough lesson to learn. Other races that I've done well in, usually a success in a marathon or ultra is that I didn't have any stomach issues and I didn't totally bonk. And so then if I do that, I'm like, write down that nutrition hydration plan. But it has to do with your pacing too. So it's kind of tricky to pinpoint.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Was Western States your first 100? I don't remember.
Well, so it was my first 100 finish. But okay. I was gonna have UTMB in 2015, the year before. I wanted that to be my first 100, so I had a high ultra score back then. So they, as an elite, they kind of just let you into UTMB. That was on the old system. So 2015 UTMB was supposed to be my first 100-mile. What happened is I actually fell in the middle of the night crossing the border into Italy, and I sliced my knee open, and I had to get stitches and Courmayeur, and I was bleeding, and then I ended up dropping out because of that knee injury. But I can't say I was feeling real great. Like I was in 5th place when it happened, and then I basically could only walk after that. And you're not even halfway done. UTMB is 106 miles. I was like 44 miles in. And you're in the middle of the night there, like going over this mountain pass between the French to Italy border. And I was like, I just need to get to Courmayeur. And they tried to put stitches in me, and I tried to keep going. And then I actually had to get a helicopter rescue. It was really embarrassing,
Oh
but
gosh.
it wasn't a nutrition thing so much as it was that injury. So basically, I didn't finish UTMB, and then I ran the Black Canyon 100K and qualified for Western States the next year. And so then
Okay.
when I did Western States, it was my second start, first 100-mile finish. But yeah, 100 milers are a different beast than a 100K, at least in my experience.
Yeah. Is that a distance that you want to attempt again, or are you happy doing shorter stuff?
Oh no, I want to. It's been bothering me that I haven't closed 100 hard. So I want to keep doing that. And I feel like as I get older, it's kind of a natural progression to move up
Sure.
in distance. And yeah, I love the history behind, especially like UTMB, the mountain line. I went out last year and did it over 4 days just to see the course more. So yeah, it's kind of been bothering me that I haven't had a strong 100-miler, and I still think I have one left in me. So I want to try to keep taking a crack at it. But yeah.
Do you think that's where like your biggest nutrition challenge is, like kind of trying to crack that nutrition code for longer distance in terms of whether it's incorporating more actual food or what are you kind of thinking there?
I think, I mean, it depends on the 100, but I think it's more of not so much that the race is 100 miles. It's just the sheer amount of time that you're out there. Like I always tell people, like, everything's hard. Running a 5K on the track is really hard. And longer distance race isn't necessarily harder, but there's more variables that could go exponentially wrong, like your nutrition or dehydration. Like you could get, you could gut through a marathon maybe in 2 or 3 hours and still finish, right? But if you're talking about a 30-hour 100-mile race and you start getting massively dehydrated, that's going to take a lot of people out. Like you're not going to finish. So struggling with keeping myself hydrated and then fueled without getting GI distress definitely seems to be a challenge more after about 8 to 10 hours, I'd say. And I think, part of it is probably experimenting more with solid foods and then knowing exactly what you could take at the aid stations. Because the thing that saved me, like I went back in 2017 and I finished UTMB, but it still wasn't good. And part of it was my stomach. But I'd also say part of it was just my legs too. Like, it's hard to separate like what's causing the leg fatigue, whether maybe you didn't train enough for hard downhills, or maybe you're just running low on glycogen and that's why your muscles hurt so much. So it's a tricky puzzle, but there's definitely, I see improvements definitely on the nutrition front and the strategy there and the learning process. And then also on the training front too, especially racing in Europe. It's a lot different.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned your parents, at various races. Are they typically crewing you, at least in the US, or would they be coming to races now, or was that more in the past?
They'd still come to races. I've been really lucky. They've been super supportive of my running ever since I started running track. But they've been crewing at a lot of ultra races. So the time when I was at Western States, they were crewing, and then they went to Chamonix once. That first year at UTMB, they were there. But they'll try to make it out for a couple races, maybe a year. They're both retired now, so it's easier for them. But they've been super supportive with that, and usually it's like my mom's holding a bag of chips and my dad's holding my drinks and the gels. And then,
awesome.
And then I tell them, like, one of them, I want like a GoPro on his head so he could film the transition. If you look back on my YouTube channel at like Lake Sonoma and stuff, I've done that one 3 times, and some of it's like GoPro footage from my dad, like at the aid station.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Put them to work. Love it.
Yeah.
What does a typical day of eating look like for you these days? And maybe it changes based on whether you're in the middle of a harder training cycle or training for an event or not. But maybe you can kind of walk us through what something might look like.
Yeah, so it's actually I kind of live on a rock and roll schedule. Like I'll stay up really late. I'm kind of a night owl. But then other days like today, we did this big mountain adventure and I woke up pretty early. So like depending on when I wake up, it could be anywhere between 5 a.m. or 10 a.m. So
Mm-hmm.
that's already like my meal times are not consistent. I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's some days, most days I try to eat 3 solid meals a day. I'll wake up, I'll have a couple cups of black coffee for breakfast. I'll have orange juice, and then usually I've been trying to eat more oatmeal. I tend to run well when I have like plain oatmeal with some peanut butter. I've been roasting some walnuts, and I sprinkle some roasted walnuts on top for the omega-3.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then some dried fruit, cranberries, maybe, and then I love blueberries. Are like my favorite superfood, so I'll always have like a bunch of blueberries. And then yeah, I'll put some maple syrup on it too. So usually a big bowl of oatmeal, or a lot of times we'll eat just toast with peanut butter and jam on it.
Mm-hmm.
Some special mornings I'll make waffles or pancakes. But usually I always have something sweet with my coffee for breakfast. And then I'll do some work for a couple hours and then I'll usually get out and run. If I woke up later in the day, that might be around lunchtime though. So then I might end up skipping lunch kind of or snacking, after that run.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then my partner Sandy and I consistently usually cook together. We alternate who cooks every night for dinner, but we'll usually eat
Mm-hmm.
dinner at a pretty solid time, and it'll usually be some sort of like oh, I skipped over lunch. I just realized.
That's
Trying to
okay.
eat more salads. I've been trying to eat more salads for lunch. Like I just cooked up some quinoa, and then I'll make like a little bowl with quinoa and then some like leafy greens, and then I love bell peppers, avocado, balsamic vinaigrette. Sometimes I'll have a frozen burrito, prepackaged burrito for lunch, stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. But then for dinner, it's a lot of grain bowls, like rice based, a lot of tofu, Asian stir fry. Sometimes we'll go out to eat. There's actually a lot of pizza places local here that have vegan cheese options, or we'll just
Oh,
get a
nice.
pizza with no cheese on it.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of veggies. And then, yeah, we usually just roast a lot of vegetables and have a sauce, maybe tahini sauce or a peanut sauce. A lot of tofu, I'd say.
Is that like tofu and whole grains and beans, legumes, and nut seeds? It's like all the typical whole food vegan protein sources. Those are your go-tos, you'd say?
Yeah. I like to make these like cheese sauces where it's like I'll soak like cashews or some sort of almonds,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll mix it with like nutritional yeast and lemon juice and some spices,
Oh,
and
nice.
make like a fettuccine alfredo
Yeah.
um, or lasagna. Even you could just mix up,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, a lot of nut based sauces too.
Cool. For your pancakes and waffles, do you have like a go-to recipe you like to use? Or using like a mix instead? What are you usually doing?
I've done all of the above over the years. I guess I use I find some recipes on the internet, like Nora Cooks or something, and I'm using like white flour a lot of times. But there was a
That's
time where I
okay.
used like Bob's Red Mill mix, where you just
Uh-huh.
like mix in a little
Yep.
water and oil,
Yep.
and you can make
Mm-hmm.
waffles and pancakes. So, I mean, I grew up, my parents would cook us pancakes, and they'd try to mix in like whole wheat flour instead of all white flour. And then my dad would always be like, we'll cut the sugar in half. Because like some of the recipes, it's like, we don't need a full cup of refined sugar. We'll do like half a cup of sugar. And so I'll
Mm.
experiment around. Sometimes Sandy will make fun of me, but I actually don't follow recipes when I'm baking sometimes. And it's been a disaster. You don't
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
just, you don't
Baking's
want to just,
one. Yeah.
you don't
That's a little
just want
tough.
to estimate a pinch of baking
No.
soda or salt, like, well, pinch of salt, but not baking soda or baking powder. You can't get that ratio too far off.
Yeah.
It's very precise. So,
Yep.
yeah, I'll mix. I'll try to. Sometimes I'll add like bananas to make it sweeter, or think like, oh, this is a good egg substitute.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes if we have flax meal, I'll mix it with water and be like, okay, that'll be a good binder. Instead of, because we're not using egg. Sometimes I have just egg, the egg
Mm-hmm.
substitute too. So
Yep.
I like a lot of baked goods. I kind of have a sweet tooth.
Awesome. Awesome. What is like kind of your favorite thing to bake, would you say, other than, well, you make your pancakes and your waffles. Do you have any favorite kind of baked good that you make in your house?
I mean, the thing I've been doing more lately is probably just like peanut butter cookies. So I love to
Oh,
cook
nice.
just just cookies. If I'm more ambitious, I'll bake cinnamon rolls or something like that. And sometimes I'll make like biscuit dough and then roll it up as like a cinnamon roll. Or
Hmm.
like I like pies a lot, especially like pumpkin pie in the fall. But even, apple pie anytime. So those are my
Nice.
favorites.
You've come a
I
long way
bake I
from
bake like
McDonald's pies.
yes, yes. I think those technically might have been vegan though, actually.
Oh, really?
I'm not
Interesting.
sure. Don't quote me on that.
I do not know that.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe we can spend just a few minutes talking about, back it was a couple years ago, you've had, had those health complications with your pulmonary embolisms. And I watched the vlog you put out last March, kind of going through the procedure that you had that was planned, because you were saying that you've had some ongoing breathing issues. Where are you right now with all of this? Are you still having some breathing issues, and other things you're looking into here?
Yeah, yeah. So I had a bilateral pulmonary embolism about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago now, and it
Hmm.
was it was sudden. Um, and after that, I had it for like 5 weeks, so I was coughing up blood, and I didn't know they misdiagnosed it. They thought I had pneumonia, but it was a pulmonary embolism. I couldn't. I went from running to like not being able to run at all because I felt like I couldn't breathe at all, and I had trouble like sleeping at night. So it was really bad. I had to get rushed to the emergency room, and I was on blood thinners for 3 months. I had to be overnighted in the hospital because it's like I had clots in both of my lungs, pretty substantial. And because I had it for 5 weeks, it started killing a lot of my lung tissue. So I still have like scar tissue in my lungs, and that was one reason why they thought I'd have breathing problems. So then when I started running again and training, I have felt more like I can't catch my breath. And
Mm,
ever since then, it's been really frustrating because I've had all these hospital tests done. At first they thought I had residual clots, and the clots came back. And there's all sorts of really serious conditions you could have that cause this. But I got tested for like tons of things. I've had so many tests done in the last couple years. Um,
hmm.
like you could have some people have a genetic predisposition for it. A lot of times uh, there's a lot of reasons why you could get a pulmonary embolism, from cancer to having a heart defect or something like that. So they're scanning my heart, scanning my lungs. But ever since then, I haven't been able to race as fast, and I don't feel like I could run as
Mm,
fast. So it's
okay.
been tough. And I don't know if that's ever going to come back. At the same time, I'm also getting older. So, like, I don't know if, because I'm like 37 now. So
Yeah,
it's hard to
yeah,
compete with yourself from 10 years ago, especially when you started
sure.
running at such a young age at a pretty high level. So part of it could just be I'm slowing down as I get older. But I think ever since the pulmonary embolism, there's it did something to my lungs, and the doctors don't know a lot of things, or the tests haven't shown anything like really
Mm,
conclusive, I guess. The good news is I didn't have residual clots or another clot, and I never had problems with any blood clots my whole life. And my heart seems strong, so uh, I got that going.
yeah. I mean, that obviously all that is way more important, but I can imagine that the slowing down and not being able to run like you used to is very frustrating.
Yeah, yeah, I know it has been.
Yeah. Um, so when you were taking, you said you were not running for it. Was it, you said 5 months, or was it 5 weeks? I didn't
Oh,
catch which,
I
how long
had
it was.
it was 5 weeks because
5 weeks. Okay. Okay.
I didn't know I had a pulmonary embolism, but
Oh, got it. Okay.
I had this pain. It started off as pain in my back, which felt like it was
Oh,
more like just a muscle strain, because I'll tweak my
mm,
back from running or using trekking
yeah.
poles or something, lifting
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
didn't
Mm-hmm.
think too much of it. But then I was coughing up blood, which they said could happen if you have pneumonia, but I never had
Yeah.
pneumonia either. and so then that delayed things more. But I'd go out and run, and I instantly couldn't breathe.
Ugh,
So
yeah,
it wasn't by
so
choice that
hard.
I took the 5 weeks off. It was more like
Yeah,
I thought I had pneumonia for a couple weeks, and it
got
was
it.
misdiagnosed. But it was physically impossible for me to run.
How
S
much time did you take off altogether, like once you were kind of diagnosed and everything?
Oh, I started running as soon as they said I could. So
Oh, okay.
once I got rushed to the ER and spent the overnight in the hospital, I started off with like they injected me with a blood thinner, and then I had blood thinner pills. And
Hmm.
it was probably within a week, or I think I waited maybe an extra week. So I think it was 2 weeks
Okay.
after the diagnosis that I started running again. So pretty quickly. And then, yeah, that
Okay.
first 3 months on blood thinners, I was already running quite a bit. But it was hard for me to come back, and because I lost fitness just from not running, but also it's always been harder to breathe ever since then. So there was
Mm,
that too.
yeah. And I I imagine I'm guessing there probably weren't any nutrition implications to all of this, but maybe you can confirm that if anything changed on the nutrition front because of this whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say, yeah, I can't guarantee anything 100%.
Sure.
But I'd say it's not related to nutrition at all. I mean, like theoretically, if someone ate like 2 pounds of kale every day or Brussels sprouts and they spiked their vitamin K level, like that could cause something. But if anything, I'd say my diet probably helped save me from having a heart attack or something. Because there were right before I got to the emergency room, it felt like I was going to have a heart attack, and that's usually what
Ugh.
people pass away from when they have a pulmonary
Yeah.
embolism, because it puts so much pressure on your heart. So like my cholesterol is really good. I have really good blood flow. Um, I think, yeah, being an athlete and not having clogged arteries probably really helped me. Like it would have caused a lot more damage probably. But yeah, the nutrition, I'd say, yeah, I don't know for sure, but I don't think it really matters what kind of diet people have when it comes to getting a pulmonary embolism. Like the
Sure.
number one cause is probably like, um, I mean, there's dozens of things that could cause a pulmonary embolism, from like it could have been COVID related. It could be a lot of times there's a higher incidence with endurance athletes. Like if you get massively dehydrated, possibly. I think I don't know if you know much about if you've had experience with pulmonary embolism, but
Mm.
like female athletes on birth control is definitely a risk factor,
Yeah.
I've heard.
Yep.
Having like factor five, like some of the genetic blood conditions that people have. Um, I mean, running or ultra and then jumping on an airplane could do it if
Yeah.
it comes up
Sure.
as a DVT from your leg, which is usually what it does. But I had no evidence of a DVT either, and I didn't do an ultra race or jump on the plane. So uh, yeah, I'd say, and heart defects are another one. If there's like a blood flow constriction, something like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I did all this testing because I was trying to find more answers, and I haven't really found very many answers.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's hard it's hard to imagine that it's just getting older. That I mean, obviously we slow down as we age, so that is a factor. But and just to clarify, I meant more in terms of nutrition implications, like if it was having gone through the experience was leading you to make any changes yourself. But no, I think it's helpful to also talk about nutrition as you just did in the context of like why did this happen, right?
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so but it sounds like you haven't changed anything in, your eating patterns as a result of having had this diagnosis, correct?
Yeah, no, I haven't really
Yeah.
changed much
Yeah.
in the last decade.
Yeah, it sounds like except for, performance nutrition, it seems to have changed a bit and evolved, and of course you incorporate new products. Um and yeah, I mean, what's on the horizon for you? Are you training for anything right now? Are there any projects you'd like to share on here with my audience?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm pretty active on social media. I like to do
Yep.
a lot of videos. So there's video projects, film projects that I've been working on. I'm always working on coaching stuff. And then I am training for, I got into a sky running race. So like a 20-mile mountain
Nice.
race in Canada called the Minotaur Sky Race, which is 2 weeks from this weekend. And then I'm going to do some of the UTMB series as well. Not the UTMB race, but I have an entry for the TDS race in Chamonix at the end of August, which is that's like the 80-mile. I don't even know the exact distance. It's about 80 miles with 20,000 feet of climbing, and it kind of goes off the traditional UTMB trekking path. But before that, in July, I have an entry to the Val d'Aran 100K that I've been training for. So it's another UTMB series race, and then I haven't decided for the end of the year, but maybe 100 miles. We'll see how these other ones go. 100K in the mountains is going to be tough enough, I think.
Yeah, well, you sound like you have a very busy and fun summer coming up.
Yeah, I do like to travel, so it's cool to see new landscapes, and I like seeing different mountain ranges, so it's been good.
Awesome. So we'll just finish this up with some of my quick bites questions. So number 1, favorite post-race meal or snack?
Oh, probably beer and pizza.
Pizza's a big theme for you. You really like your pizza. What's your favorite kind of pizza?
It's my favorite food. One with a good crust. I actually like thin crust or deep dish. I'm not like partial to like New York style or Chicago style.
Sure.
I like to put pineapple on my pizza though, like pineapple, black olives. I like some of the artisan vegan cheese. So like usually like a nut-based cheese. Vegan cheese is like my favorite, or like vegan pesto. But if it's a good crust and a really good marinara sauce, I'll just have a margarita or just a pizza without any cheese on it. No vegan substitute. But I do like bell peppers and black olives and pineapple on it. So onions.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Biggest cooking catastrophe, if you've had one?
Probably one of my baking. Can I include my baked goods? Because I'll have like a midnight snack. I'll try to make myself some cookies, and if we don't have all the ingredients, I'll try to make it up and not follow a recipe, or I don't want to measure stuff out. And those have been disasters a lot of times because, like I said, you add too much baking soda or baking powder, and then you mess up the liquid ingredients with the flour, and it bakes, and it looks okay before it bakes, and then after it comes out, it either is like a total mess, or hard as a rock, or dry, or crumbly, or it tastes bad too. So I've had that. Yeah, probably that.
So have you learned your lesson? Are you now following recipes, or are you still doing this?
I've learned my lesson for the most part. Yeah.
Okay.
I've learned it's not worth it because of those catastrophes. I want something edible that doesn't just fall apart or isn't like liquid soup.
Yeah. Well, given that you like to travel, what would you say is the most exotic or interesting food that you've ever tried?
Ooh, exotic or interesting. It was interesting at the time because when I said I lived in Japan for a full year when I was 8 years old. My dad was just teaching English over there, and we were all vegetarian, which was back in, I guess it was in the 90s, it's kind of a foreign concept depending on what small town you might be in Japan or any country in the world or state in the US. And we found this, it was like this Buddhist temple where you could have, I think it was all vegan actually. The monks that were there would make these all vegan meals, and it was like raw food vegan. But I remember they brought out these giant blocks of like chilled tofu that they had made at the temple with like raw ginger sprinkled on top. And it was like the best tofu I've ever had in my life. But they also had all sorts of things like, I don't even know what it was. It was like, it looked like twigs from a tree branch, but it tasted amazing. Cool. It wasn't twigs. It was designed to look like twigs. But it was like this 5-course meal at this temple in Japan when I was 8 years old. That was very exotic. and it was all vegan. I was impressed.
That is so cool. What is your favorite beverage?
Probably beer. I love
any favorite
beer.
kinds?
Well, I'm roughly sponsored by Avery Brewing in Boulder,
Oh,
Colorado.
okay.
I've been with them for 8 years. My favorite type of beer is almost always a West Coast style IPA. So I
Okay.
like big hops, but I like to try different beers. Especially in different countries, but then also different styles. It kind of goes with the season. Like in the winter when it's cold, I'll drink more stouts and porters. Then in the summer, maybe I'll try even some lighter lagers. But usually, I'm kind of a stickler with the craft beer scene, the American craft beer scene. But I'll try everything. I've been known to have some sours and other things. But yeah, IPA beer definitely.
What are your comfort foods?
Comfort foods. Oh, I think we're going back to the pancakes and pizza. I like to make a vegan mac and cheese is probably one of my favorites. Or trying the mac and cheese at vegan specialty restaurants, because I think it's something that needs a lot of improvement in the vegan space. When you get a mac and cheese, and I've found like if I do my homemade one, it could be pretty good. And I'm usually using like some sort of nut, either almonds or cashews. But then how you mix in the spices and what other ingredients you use, there's a real art to it. But like, yeah, baked rich mac and cheese. Or I like trying vegan burgers too at different places, not just Impossible or Beyond, but even if it's a house made black bean patty or something like that. I like to evaluate vegan restaurants on their classic burger.
Awesome. What's your favorite dessert?
Depends on my mood, but chocolate cake if I had to pick one. I like baked goods. I mean, I eat a lot of sweets, so cookies, but yeah, definitely cake. Something solid, something sweet, and yeah, chocolate cake's probably my favorite.
I'm curious if, like, when you're exploring the whole solid food during a 100-miler situation, if you would maybe go with some sort of like a cookie or a baked good of some kind, like a harder one that wouldn't get smushed. Maybe that's a good option for you since you like those so much. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Pancakes, a stack of pancakes.
Yeah, there you go. That would also work. Stuff them in your vest. Okay, last question. Top 3 items of gear that are most essential to your active lifestyle.
Ooh. Not just running then.
However you want to interpret that.
My active lifestyle. Yeah, so my Camelback running vest with the trekking pole quiver. So like you could carry all your hydration, nutrition on you. It's got zipper pockets, carry a liter, carry a reservoir of fluid. So the running vest is huge. I'll say my GoPro because I film a lot on the run. Usually not during races, but for training runs and just filming outside. I love having a camera. And then, that's a tough question. I've really gotten into skiing the last couple of years, so I love my skis.
Awesome.
And yeah, they're a favorite.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sage. This has been great. Where can everybody find you online?
Yeah, I'm at VO2 Max Productions on YouTube. That's the name of my channel, but if you just search my name, you could find me on YouTube. And then at Sage Canaday on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, good luck with all your races. I'll definitely be following along. And this episode will be coming out in August, I believe. So maybe it's before you're out in UTMB. I'm not sure when that race is, but I wish you the best of luck with all your future race endeavors.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Yeah, great talk. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's our show for today. Thank you, Sage, so much for taking the time to chat with me. Guys, what do you want to hear from me on this show? I want to hear from you. Do you have topic requests? I already tackled a couple that came my way, and those are actually coming out next. So REDS was one of them, and nutrition for perimenopausal and postmenopausal athletes, that's another. So those are coming up by two amazing sports dietitians. But I'd love to hear what else you want me to address on here, whether it's an interview with an athlete or a specific topic, something that I can discuss on my own, questions you have for me, topics you want me to, tackle with another dietitian. I would love to hear from you. And you can reach me at claire@eatforendurance.com. I am still checking my other email, eatforendurance@gmail. If you would like to use that one, either one is fine. So let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And lastly, I know I've been asking this every time, but if you're able to give me any support, whether it's a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen, subscribing to the show, sharing it with your friends, financially, if you're able to make a small contribution on Patreon, or just doing your normal shopping on Amazon and doing it through my affiliate link, all of this really, really helps the show keep going and growing, which I'm really trying to do. So your help is much appreciated here. All right, everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time.